Hi! In this video, we're going to show you how to assemble an Urban Arrow Shorty delivered in 2 boxes. Here you can see the pallet with the 2 boxes. The small box contains the rear frame, the handlebar and the steering tube. The big box contains the front frame, the EPP box, the parts package, the front fork and wheel, and the steering rod. The parts package consists of the Urban Arrow Shorty user manual, the Bosch charger and charging cable, the tie wraps, a set of pedals, and a bell. If you ordered a Shorty with a Gates belt drive, you will also find the kiosk display in the parts package. That's what's in the boxes. Now, let's build it. Step 1. Preparing the front frame. Remove the front frame from the box in order to prepare the bike for assembly. Set aside the steering rod for the time being. We will need that part later. Tighten the bike's kickstand a bit first for optimum stability during assembly. When you're satisfied, move on to the next step. Step 2. Handlebar. Place the rear frame on the workbench and use the supports to balance the bike. Position the rear frame in such a way that you have enough room to guide the steering tube into the frame. Now take the steering tube and fit the bottom compression ring and the bearing. And gently guide the steering tube upwards through the frame. Be mindful of the top riv nuts. Guide the steering tube past them with your fingers from above to prevent them coming into contact with the riv nuts. Now fit the top bearing. Compression ring. Filler ring. Top cover and possible spacer by sliding them over the steering tube. Before mounting the handlebar and the stem on the steering tube, apply some grease to the star nut and the inside of the stem. This prevents creaking in the future. Position the stem. Make sure that you don't damage any gear cables or brake hoses when you do this. Now check the direction of the steering tube. This is set to the right direction if the mounting point for the steering rod is located on the left-hand side of the bike. You can now tighten the top bolt on the stem until you feel resistance. Tighten the stem's clamp bolt a bit. Do not tighten it too much yet, because you will need some flexibility in it later. The final angle, orientation and torque specifications can be found on the stem and are discussed in Step 7. Step 3. Preparing to connect front and rear frame. Feed the lighting wire and brake hose under the front frame. Make sure that both the hose and the wire pass under the kickstand. Remove the cover strip on the front of the steering tube and place the brake hose for the front brake in the cable channel. Remount the cover strip so that the brake hose remains in place between the front and rear frame. Now fit the brake hose guide on the top of the steering tube so that the hose cannot kink. Step 4. Lighting. All our front lights can be connected as follows. Remove the cover strip from the left bottom side of the rear frame. Remove the motor cable from the tube so that you can easily access the lighting wire. Now use the light cable guide tool to pull the lighting wire through the frame connection. Position the tool parallel to the tube and push it forward. Place the lighting wires connector in the PVC nipple. Carefully guide the wire towards the back by pushing it with your other hand. If necessary, you can grease the wire and the outside of the PVC nipple of the cable guide tool a bit. Make sure that you do not get any grease on the inside of the PVC nipple. Clean the cable guide tool immediately after use. Make the connection. Verify the connection is working properly by turning the lights on and off a few times on the display. Neatly place back the wire in the tube. Add the motor cable as well and put the cover strip back in its original position. Step 5. Connecting front and rear frame. When the bike is balanced correctly, you can connect the front and rear frame using the 4 M10 bolts. You must apply a medium-strength thread locker, Loctite 243, to these bolts. Use the bottom hole and make sure to use a well-fitting Allen key. The final step is to tighten the greased M6 bolts crossways in the top of the steering tube as shown, to prevent distortion and slipping of the bolts. It's time to tighten the connecting bolts to 26 Nm. Use your torque wrench for this. Step 6. Disc brake. The caliper is already connected to the fork. Follow these steps to complete the installation of the brake. In order to fit the brake lever, remove the grip. Slide the brake lever onto the handlebar and adjust it as required. Remount and secure the grip. We will now check whether the caliper is positioned correctly. You can use something like a rubber band to position the caliper correctly. Tighten the bolts in turn and verify the disc can spin freely and does not come into contact with the brake pads. Adjust the positioning if there is contact with the brake pads. Step 7. Steering rod. Check the assembly of the linkage hinge. It must turn smoothly. A very slight vertical play, less than 0.3 mm, is permitted. If the assembly of the linkage hinge does not meet these requirements, please contact the service department or consult the dealer manual for more information about the correct assembly, use of the correct tool, and applying a thread locker. Now grab the steering rod. Place the steering rod around the linkage hinge that is already fitted on the steering tube. Use the M8x60 bolt on the back. Insert the bolt with washer through the steering linkage hinge and secure it on the inside with a washer and nut. Tighten to 4 Nm. We are now going to connect the front. Make sure that the ball joint and lock nut are tightened in the steering rod. A maximum of 1 cm of thread may remain visible. The less thread we can see, the better. Now insert the M8x45 bolt with a large washer and a spacer through the ball joint. Take the last spacer and place it under the ball joint over the bolt, and then insert the entire assembly in the middle hole of the front fork plate. Now place the small washer and the lock nut under the front fork plate. Now adjust the ball joint so that the steering rod can still move freely in the extreme positions and does not touch the mudguard. If it does touch, the ball joint may need to be turned outwards further. When the extreme positions have been correctly dialed in, secure the ball joint with a 17 mm wrench, whilst holding the ball joint itself with an 11 mm wrench. And tighten to 16 Nm. Place the wheel in a straight position. Make sure that it no longer moves and align the stem in the same direction. Then tighten the clamp bolts to the tightening torque specified on the stem. The tightening torque for the connection between the handlebar and the stem can be found here. Step 8. Pedals. Add some assembly paste and use the pedal wrench to finish the job. Make sure to fit the pedals on the correct side. Step 9. Fitting the bell and Bosch settings. Mount the bell so that the rider can use it easily. If the Urban Arrow is equipped with a kiosk or neon display, this is the time to connect it to the bike. If the bike is equipped with the Purion display, this is already mounted on the handlebar. Connect the display to the computer. Use the Bosch dealer software and dongle to carry out updates and adjust the time and language settings if necessary. By default, the first service is set at 500 km and the language is set to English. Step 10. Handover check. In order to ensure that this Urban Arrow Shorty leaves your store in perfect condition, you must carry out the following final checks before handover. Degrease the brake discs with some brake cleaner and a clean cloth. And check the adjustment of the front and rear brake. The gear cables must have a play of around 1 mm. Spoke tension. Alignment of the speed sensor. Check the path of the brake hose to the back wheel. Make sure that the hose is not touching the wheel or the disc, and that the P-clips are tight and angled upright, so that the brake hose cannot slide through the clips. Frame lock. Chain or belt drive tension. When fitting the battery, you must hear a click to be sure that it is properly secured. Check the bike computer and its functions. Turn the key and pull the battery backwards to remove it. You can now place it in the charger. The lights. Tire pressure. And, finally, check that all bolts and nuts are properly tightened. All Newton-meter specifications can be found here. Last but not least, loosen the bolts on the kickstand a bit so that it folds up easily. Using the kickstand should feel really smooth. After all these checks, carry out a good test ride on the bike. This allows you to check your own work, and you must brake in the brake pads. You can also use a disc brake bed-in roller machine for this. Check whether the shifter operates smoothly and that the gears work as they should. Give it a final polish, and then this brand new Urban Arrow Shorty is good to go.